Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. It's time now for Top Story. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is facing new pressure from Turkey and the United States to stop his harsh repression of the protest movement that's been challenging his rule for 5 months now. According to US officials, President Obama is on the verge of calling on the Syrian leader to step down, as human rights groups say that nearly 2,000 people have died since the demonstrations began. Another 12 people were killed on Thursday in northern towns in Syria, and in a moment I'll be talking to our international affairs editor Annette Young about that. But first, Shona Bhattacharya reports.
It's become the Obama administration's official stance against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
The United States believes that Syria would be a better place without Assad.
Little by little, the White House has tightened its noose around the Syrian regime. The administration is one step away from calling on the Syrian leader to step down. Together, Bashar al-Assad and his father, Hafez, have ruled the country for over 40 years. Since mid-March, rights groups say close to 2,000 people have died in protests against the regime, inspired by events in Tunisia and Egypt. In response, Washington imposed sanctions against a Syrian state bank and the country's biggest mobile phone company this week. Thursday, the White House vowed to continue, but called on other countries to participate.
Well, what we really need to do to put the pressure on Assad is to sanction the oil and gas industry, and we want to see Europe take more steps in that direction, and we want to see China take steps with us.
Meanwhile, Syrian government forces pursued their offensive. Amateur footage showed gun battles in the streets of Homs. And though tanks were seen leaving Hama Wednesday, witnesses said security forces remain scattered around the city.
Well, joining me now to discuss that further is our international affairs editor, Annette Young. Annette, thanks for joining us. So, first of all, is time running out for President Assad now?
Well, there's some key events that have happened in the last week, Lorna, and I think primarily messages coming from their Syria's neighbours. It's been that in the past they've been reluctant to express their opinions because they've been more fearful of what would happen if Assad was ousted, as opposed to the absolute horrendous crackdown we've been seeing happening in the country. And it obviously is that they've changed their minds. Now, in the last week, we saw Turkey dispatching its foreign minister, making it very clear that Assad had to speed up reforms and also enforce an immediate pull-out of troops from Syrian cities. A similar message, of course, earlier in the week came from Saudi Arabia, whose worries about the spread of Arab revolutions until now had outweighed distaste for Syria's continuing alliance with its arch-foe Iran. Now, what this does do, because combined with not just only Syria's neighbours but the Arab League, who have been notably silent, have now come out and expressed their concern over the violence, what this does do is now remove any excuses for Russia and China to block tougher actions or words from the UN Security Council as they did early in the month. And as a result, the stage is now set for worse punishment.
Now, you talk about punishment. How effective are international sanctions? The opposition's accused the US and others of moving slowly on this front, haven't they?
They have, and they say that the time has come for the US and the EU to intensify their unilateral sanctions, in particular against the struggling oil sector, because what's happened, not surprisingly, in the last 5 months, the tourism revenue has dried up completely, and revenue from oil represents around a third of the country's total export earnings. And the opposition is saying that this would require sanctions against Syrian marketing companies, as well as the port of Tartus, not to mention, obviously, oil companies. It would deprive the regime of crucial revenue. While Syria is a small oil producer, its sector has been in decline. Its oil production now is down to around 390,000 barrels a day. The reality is that they refine most of their oil in Europe. So this is where the EU involvement is crucial.
Now, Annette, we've been asking this perhaps for months now, but what is going to be the tipping point in Syria? What will it take for President Assad to go?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Lorna, that because the country has been nearly self-sufficient in food and energy, and the middle class has to this point, given its support to the Alawite-led regime, that has, of course, bolstered the government, primarily because the middle class don't want to see happen to Syria what they've seen happen in neighbouring Iraq with, sectarian violence. Yet observers inside the country are noting a shift, if you like, a mood change as such. And Damascus and Aleppo, Syria's two largest cities, have remained relatively quiet. There are words now that businessmen are reaching out to the opposition. There are whispers of defections, and of course we just saw the recent unexplained replacement of Assad's defence minister, which is hinting at obviously some sort of degree of dissent within the inner circle. But the key thing now will be how much dissent is there, and will it come from the army? Because at the moment the army is under command of the Alawite the elite rather are Alawites. This is the same minority group that the Syrian president comes from, and that will be the key turning point if they turn around and say to the president, your time has come.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Annette Young, our International Affairs Editor there. That's just about it for Top Story. Many thanks for joining us. Do stay tuned to France 24.